everyone. I'm live on location. So normally I introduce saying hi to everyone in each respective time zone. And rather than typically being in the future compared to people on the West Coast, I am now in the past relative to my normal East Coast time. I'm out in Vegas for a little a work trip. So I'm coming to you not only live on location, but also I was talking to Jeff about, the irony is everything that I'm going to be talking about this month, I've been experiencing myself. Airports, time zone changes, food changes, environment changes, jet lag. It's all a real thing. So I'm glad that I was able to talk about these things, not from just pure conceptual philosophy, but also some experiential wisdom. So here we are in August. The months are clicking along, and this is the first time we have covered travel. So for those who are with us for the 3-month expose of aging, hope you learned a lot. Thank you for the opportunity to do that, and thank you even more for being present. Now we're getting into the travel season. If you have ever spent any extended amount of time in Europe, it's a little bit different over there. Nothing happens in the month of August. In the Western world, or the North American continent, I should say, we're not quite so staunch in terms of our shutting off time in the month of August, but I do think it typically is still the most popular travel month because after August comes September, and that means back to school. And that's a little shout out as to what we're going to be foreshadowing for next month. So we wanted to do all things travel this month because, as always, we want to share insights with all of our just trying to share my screen here, insights with everyone in terms of the best possible way to approach any specific process, i.e., travel, anything else, with the use of the Master Supplements US Enzymes product line. So travel is always a fun thing. It's always something to look forward to in terms of vacation. But anyone on this call, I bet you they've had some, at least one, if not multiple experiences where sometimes things can go bad during travel. And that thing can typically be surrounding your digestive system if it becomes an acute problem, or just if anyone's done a trip where they're crossing multiple time zones, crossing a large ocean, uh, jet lag can be a real thing. I used to travel to Southeast Asia, this was years ago, once a quarter for about a year and a half. And I can promise you, lying awake in bed at midnight when my body thought it was noon, lunchtime, you're just staring at the ceiling, wondering, how am I ever going to go to sleep? And these are things that, although come part and parcel of the experience with travel, can have a negative effect upon the body under two specific conditions. The first is the fact that the body becomes stressed under these scenarios. So you become more susceptible, and your immunity, so to speak, becomes a little bit weakened. But the other aspect is it can negatively impact your ability to enjoy a trip. If you're, walking around a city center at 3 p.m. in the afternoon and all of a sudden your body hits this massive lull, all you want to do is sleep. But if you have a tour planned or some sort of sightseeing adventure that you booked, you want to make sure that you can maximize and optimize your body's ability to acclimatize to the new time zone, hopefully allow yourself to adjust as quickly as possible. So when traveling smart, you always want to be prepared. Don't forget your passport. And if you do wear something like this, you've watched too many Griswold movies of family vacations, so on and so forth. I've never actually seen someone, I shouldn't say that. I have seen some people in line wearing Tommy Bahama shirts, but I actually think this is probably the more cliche example of travel. But hey, if it feels good, I say do it. So we want to share our best practices for healthy travel. When most people think of travel issues, they think of going south of the border or to some foreign country. Maybe they drank the water that they shouldn't have. Maybe they went to the salad bar and they grabbed something that was fresh, potentially not washed well, or washed in the very water that they were told never to drink. And this is usually the most harrowing experience. So, what we want to do today is establish a few things. An understanding of what travel can pose upon the body, because being scientifically minded specialists in our field, we always try to honor the science first principle. And when you actually understand what travel does to you from a physiologic perspective, it's quite amazing what the body can endure simply just going on a simple vacation. The second aspect is, if there is a scenario to where something such as this happens, well, what do you do about it? Well, the fundamental thing that most people do is that roll around on the bathroom floor wishing for death to be free of the pain from food poisoning. But ultimately, there are strategies when you know how to use supplements strategically under certain conditions that we also want to get into today. So let's start by talking about what traveling does to the body, because traveling is an unconscious stress for our bodies. Before the invention of an airplane, the only travel that we would do would be by land, which is fairly slow, by sea, which is even slower, or by foot. Good luck changing time zones quickly when you're running. But fundamentally, it's an extremely unconscious, stressful event on the body because of what the body's subjected to. And you can layer that to the consciously stressful event of actually going through a major airport. If anyone's flown through Atlanta, Chicago O'Hare, or LAX, especially if you have a tight connecting flight, you'll know exactly what I mean when you're dead sprinting through an airport at 7 a.m. trying to catch a flight that's about to board and close the doors. But fundamentally, the aspects of traveling upon the body that can cause a physiologic stress, first and foremost, are early mornings and late nights, especially if you're catching like a 5 a.m. flight or a red eye, the opportunities of airport food, and I will be critical of some airports, typically the smaller ones. They're all chain restaurants and Franken food. Although some of the bigger airports are getting much more aware and self health conscious of having better choices. Some of the celebrity chefs are opening some decent restaurant airports. Close human to human contact. If you've stood in the TSA line, you're basically like cattle being fed into, I don't want to call it the slaughterhouse, but you're being funneled into the direction that they want you to travel. So you're really close proximity to other people. And when you're on the plane, most people don't realize that one reason we get so fatigued on a flight is because the percentage of sea level pressurization in a cabin is roughly 60 to 65% oxygen density. Pair that with the fact that you're 30,000 plus feet in the air, you're disconnected from the Earth's magnetic field, the lack of adequate cabin pressure, and the disconnect from the Earth's magnetic field has negative impacts upon the body that typically induce fatigue. And the third layer of that cake is a time zone shift, to which your body's forcible change of time zone happens much more quickly than your body's ability to account for the change based upon shifting your circadian rhythm. So while most people never think about any of these things, me being quite the science geek, I want to understand how these processes work. So I'm not so much at the mercy of them. I have some idea of understanding what's going on and some, therefore, strategies to potentially mitigate some of the deleterious effects. If you look at the science of jet lag, these are all the areas of the body that get negatively affected, specifically the brain's ability to regulate what time of day it is. So that regulates your circadian rhythm, your melatonin and cortisol rhythm specifically, when you should be energetic and when you should be shutting down for sleep. Has a negative or positive impact based upon mood. That's when you're either going to a big time zone shift, or in some cases, you're coming back. Your body's trying to acclimatize quickly. Temperature regulation and mental performance typically are also altered. And then all of the organ function based upon two variables. The stresses of travel, as I mentioned, having less overall energy because of a low oxygen environment. And then the fact that your body regulates itself based upon wherever your dominant time zone is. So if you live in the Eastern time zone and you eat lunch every day at 12 p.m., your body has an accustomed expectation to that regular rhythm of your day-to-day life. When you travel to England and you're, say, 5 hours ahead, all of a sudden 12 p.m. Eastern is 5 p.m., whatever the time zone is in England, which is escaping me right now. And your physiologic processes are still acclimatized to being in the Eastern time zone. So when someone travels a lot, it's a really quick way to age the body in an aggressive manner, which is the thing that we could have probably dovetailed into our aging aspect. If someone is a frequent traveler for work, that's an added layer of consideration you need to factor in if you want to be optimally healthy at all possible times. So the challenges of travel are sixfold, in my opinion. There's a change of locale in addition to a change of time zone, because sometimes you can just take a trip in the same time zone, which is not as nearly as stressful on the body. There's dietary changes. You're going to be away from home, potentially at the mercy of a resort, a hotel, or having food prepared for you externally to the house. There are sanitation changes or standards of sanitation, which we in the Western world are quite germophobic, in some cases for a positive scenario outcome, and in some cases it's essentially a little bit too overly sanitary, depending upon how frequently you lather on things like hand sanitizer and aerosol sprays. And why that can be problematic is if you go to a part of the world that has different sanitary standards, as well as different local environmental influences, i.e., the microbiome of the landscape isn't the same as where you live, that can either positively or negatively interact with your microbiome and influence your immune system to behave a certain way. High density populations of travel, whether you like it or not, you're swapping your virome and the emittance of whatever your body puts out with other people. They're breathing upon you, they're sneezing on you, they're coughing. And unfortunately, it's going to be like a gym session for your immune system. And the ability to truly relax. Why I put this one in here is most people don't realize that when the body is under stress, if the stress is consistent, then the body finds a workaround strategy to absorb the stress and keep things in a consistent operational state. When the body breaks that cycle and pattern, that's when things can fall apart. In some cases, when people go on vacation and their body can truly relax because it's out of the usual stress that it's accustomed to, your immune system can actually manifest the various illness it's been keeping at bay because the body can finally allow itself to clean house and heal. And sometimes that can manifest a presentation of an illness. So the first thing is air quality, local environmental factors. I did allude to this a little bit. Where you live and the environment you live in is what your body's accustomed to in terms of expectations. If you live in a rural setting and you go into a city center, for example, your body's going to be highly bombarded with environmental compounds. If you go to a different part of the world that has different kinds of air quality, smog factors, or a local shift in environmental influences, that can be quite stressful upon the body, specifically the immune system, because the respiratory airways are the fastest way to introduce things that are airborne into the body. So, taking into consideration your change of locale is one of the reasons we talk about microbiome and gut fortification prior to travel, because you do not want that stress to be something that can negatively impact you and your abilities to enjoy your trip. The second aspect is time zone change. I did allude to this before. The body uses light cycles to entrain the rhythms of biological processes. So if you wake up at the same time every day, you have light hit your eyes in the morning, that's when your body starts to upregulate the release of cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that stimulates the increase of blood sugar, the increase of heart rate, the dilation of blood vessels, and basically getting ready for the action of the day. If the sun sets at 7:30 p.m. in the evening and you avoid excessive amounts of bright light, your cortisol starts to dip very low, and your melatonin is the thing that takes over to help regulate the body's ability to enter rest recovery cycles based upon your physiology's yin and yang processes. The minute you change your time zone, even a couple hours, you might think that's not really a big deal. But a couple hour of time zone change has massive implications of how your body performs and operates. If you've ever gone from the East Coast to the West Coast and you realize that every time or every single morning you have a bowel movement at the same time, that pattern will shift. So everything has to shift into the ability for the body to entrain itself to the local environment. And the rule of thumb is it takes about 1 day per hour of time zone change. So if you are changing your time zone for about 5 or 6 hours, it's going to take you the better part of a week to fully acclimatize to that new time zone. And what does that matter? It means that your system is a little bit more fragile and depressed. Your immune system specifically is more depressed while your body catches up. So if you're doing this, take into account the first few days of travel should be a little bit easy in terms of you pushing yourself because your body's going to be under increased stress and duress to try to compensate for the fact that your physiology has to catch up to your geography. The third thing is dietary changes. Two major considerations that are dominated when it comes to vacation. The word all inclusive. And when most people hear all inclusive, well, typically their plate looks like this. All inclusive is typically indulgent city. Why? Because you are paying to be in that environment where there is bountiful food and there's no one who's saying how much you can or can't eat, except for yourself, of course. And you've already prepaid, so you don't feel the pinch of it. Excessive eating and indulgent eating is the first thing. And this is why making sure that you factored in the changes of your physiology and its ability to account for digestive function is a very important thing. And the second aspect is the fact that you're likely going to be eating different kinds of food in terms of your food choices, because most people on vacation are not craving carrots, celery, and broccoli. They're craving the delicious food groups and they're looking for the dessert buffet maybe twice. And then there's the quality of the food. Potentially, depending upon where you're going, you're going to be getting your produce sourced from different areas. And in some cases, like if you're going from North America to Europe, that might be a wonderful thing because the food quality in Europe is definitely a higher standard. But if you're going to go to a part of the world that maybe has slightly different sanitation aspects or considerations and standards, you might want to have an insurance policy with you, which we will talk about in the form of digestive enzymes, probiotics, and potentially HCl. The other thing is water quality. General rule of thumb is if you don't trust the municipal water from the tap, buy a good quality bottled water. And if you can always opt for something that's a spring water versus rather than a filtered tap water, make sure the water doesn't come to the table with the cap already opened. That's one of the old bait and switch tactics that sometimes places will use. And if you can get glass bottles rather than plastic bottles, your physiology will always thank you in the long run. Then there's sanitation standards themselves. I did mention that in the Western world, we tend to be overly sanitary because we think germs are a bad thing. In the other part of the world, or other parts of the world specifically, that might be a different philosophy. And this is why, as a Westerner, if you go to a country like India and Africa, if you have an interaction with a parasite or a microbe, or you get influenced by the local environment, it may put you out for a week or two, whereas someone who grew up in that environment is not negatively affected whatsoever because their microbiome and their immune system has been entrained to being able to deal with that local environment. So it really is a roll of the dice based upon one specific factor. Who's making your food and what standard are they held to? In some cases, having a slight exposure to microbes and environmental factors that are outside of the norm, providing you're healthy, can actually be a good thing for the development of, I guess, a more entrained immune system and potentially a little bit of a stress positive outcome to the microbiome in and of itself. But it is a fine line. If you're someone who is overly sanitary, stick to your practices and don't be too adventurous, and be very mindful of making sure that you wash your hands thoroughly if you're touching a lot of commonly touched surfaces, being around large groups of other people. And that dovetails nicely into the next one, which is every time I see this photo, I laugh because it's hilarious and disgusting at the same time. Being around lots of people means you're going to be swapping factors of physiology with them. That's a nice way of saying you're swapping germs with people. And if you are a healthy person, you probably are going to be okay. If you are someone who has a propensity for getting ill because you have a weakened immune system or you have a physiologic consideration because of some kind of condition or disease presentation, you do need to be more mindful of being prepared ahead of time, being mindful during the process, and then when you get back home, return to your normal aspects. I was recently in an airport in the line in TSA, and I had someone literally breathing down my neck. I heard tons of people coughing. On my flight, the person next to me was perpetually clearing their throat and they were sneezing. And we ignore these things because after a while we become conditioned to not responding to it. But the reality is we are interacting with environmental factors that are far different from our normal experiences. And if you've ever gone to a public bathroom in an airport and you've walked right out because the smell is terrible, you will know that there are people who are not as healthy as you. And unfortunately, you will have to interact with them. And if you see these people not washing their hands as they exit the bathroom, I give you full license to publicly shame them out loud. Don't say it to them. Just be like, that's disgusting. See if they pick up on it. The reality is, travel is going to stress your immune system. You cannot help this fact. And I do think becoming overly neurotic and worrisome about this idea is worse than just simply dealing with it in and of itself. But know that if you prepare, you give your immune system, your microbiome, the best possible preparatory training you possibly can, then the outcome can be that these things where you're possibly going to pick something up that may stay with you for the duration of the trip, are not going to affect you by in nearly the same way. And the last aspect is the ability to relax. And I did say this, the body under stress will operate as long as the stress is consistent. If the body can relax, if there is something in the physiology, it can really show itself. If you do your best to prepare prior to your trip, if you have been fighting something off, it may not ruin your trip if you're physiologically prepared. Being in an environment where your body can recharge, grounding, getting direct sun, allowing yourself to really learn to breathe out properly and allow the stress to dissipate. I think it's kind of ironic nowadays, and most people go on vacation, and in the last few days of the vacation, they start to become stressed because they have some idea of how much they've pushed off to be off for a week that's waiting for them when they get back. So my suggestion for everyone is if you can give your body the ability to be present, if you can allow your nervous system to be in the now and not think about the future that you're going back to, it's going to allow you to not stress your system as you return back to the environment that you escaped. So here is our travel approach, the philosophy, so to speak. And it's born out of experience, not neurosis, because I've been very fortunate to travel a lot in my life, and I have learned things the hard way. First and foremost is prepare your gut immune system. Using strategic probiotics and certain practices can help preemptively strengthen your defenses and your resistances so that if something does come your way, you wouldn't even know that it actually passed through you. The second thing is understanding logistics practices. These are things surrounding food choices and how to optimally deal with flying, especially when flying transatlantically or transpacifically. When you're at your destination, dietary practices and circadian rhythm considerations, these are the things that help your body adjust to time zone changes more seamlessly so you have a better time with less physiologic stress. And the last one is be prepared for the unexpected. Don't expect it, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And this could not be more impactful for those who have kids, because the last thing you want to do is be nursing a child who's spewing out of both ends in a hotel room while everyone else is at Disney having fun without you. So the first thing is prepare your gut and your immune system. Start dosing probiotics prior to your trip and think about the support nutrients that help support the immune system prior to leaving so it prepares your body for the best possible ability to respond appropriately to any incoming threat. This is where the Theralac, in terms of all the different opportunities, whether it's a Theralac, the Theralac Pro, or the granular Theralac, they all do the same thing. And it's really a question of dosing and concentration when it comes to why you would select one over the other. Why Theralac Pro is the most appropriate probiotic of the product portfolio to take prior to travel is because it supports a multitude of things that really help communicate with the immune system via the gut. The lactobacillus and the bifidobacterium in Theralac have a dual approach effect, one specifically focusing on the small intestine, which is the lactobacillus, where most of the immune cells reside, and the bifido have an affinity for the colon, where there are high concentrations of microbes relative to the small intestine, but those microbes have the ability to communicate back and forth via the creation of postbiotic metabolites to positively affect not only the immune system, but the metabolism. So what you're getting here is coverage that helps to both stimulate the immune system when necessary and calm the immune system when the immune system has been upregulated for some specific reason. This term is called modulation. So you want the ability for the immune system to appropriately modulate. And a manifestation of when someone doesn't have that is when someone is stuck in a state of immune stress. Either the immune system is too weak and depressed to fight something off, or the immune system is highly upregulated, it's very vigilant, and it can't calm down, causing the opposite kind of response, typically leading to immune stress activation, oxidative stress, and an inflammatory presentation. Using Theralac prior to travel, and if we have a little bit of time, Jeff can probably talk about some stories regarding this, but we also recorded a podcast about it recently. I highly suggest you listen to that. Taking Theralac a week plus prior to your trip will give you the best possible preparatory, that's basically the best preparation for your gut to allow for the immune system to solidify its ability to modulate. The features of Theralac Pro are well documented. We talk about this, but I think it's worth repeating. The thing that makes Theralac different from other probiotics on the market is the combination of sodium alginate, which is the protective casing that makes sure that the fragile bacteria get through the stomach into the small intestine and the colon. So you have the deep delivery system. And when they are there, the lactostem helps to feed these microbes so they have the best chance of colonizing and replicating. The second thing I would consider as a preparatory supplement for your trip would be Immunozyme. So Immunozyme can be associated with immune system nutrition. Why? Because it has all the fat-soluble vitamins plus antioxidants and probiotics that stimulate the induction of immune tolerance. Immune tolerance, thought about simplistically, is the immune system's ability not to overly respond or hyper respond to any sort of incoming threat, which can happen if people are highly nutritionally deficient in the key immune modulating nutrients of vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin K. So, the whole idea of what immunozyme does is it supplements the body with, in some cases, hard to find nutrients of high quality depending upon dietary choices. And it teaches the immune system to be tolerant and balanced. So, again, before you travel, your immune system is in the best possible scenario and situation to appropriately respond to any potential incoming threats that you might interact with that you can't see, but that you can experience. And in terms of taking immunozyme as a preparatory thing, it can be mirrored by taking it for about a week plus with Theralac Pro in moderate to high doses if you wish to do so to best prepare your body for the rigors of travel. And then there's the logistics aspect, and this is food and flight. And everyone has walked through the airport and had that thing, what do I feel like eating? You walk the entire terminal and like, I don't feel like that. I don't feel like that. And most of the time, when you're a health conscious person, it's hard to make good food choices at airports because most things are prepackaged for convenience or for time sensitive grab and go delays. But fundamentally, if you want to eat well at an airport, you might have to make the best of a bad situation. And this is why thinking about digestive enzymes is a good insurance policy. And this also carries over to while you're at your location, but making sure that you can digest food as optimally as possible, even when it's the worst food choice, is better than not digesting the best food choice that you can possibly make. When it comes to flight, and this is something that I find so interesting that they do in Europe, they sell these little blister packs, in some cases at kiosks right outside flight gates, and they're two capsules of nattokinase, and they're sold as ways to stop blood clots and deep vein thrombosis while traveling. And I'll get into the why, but using systemic enzymes as a way to manage flight-induced stress is a really wise thing because flying affects a few things in the body. Blood flow dynamics, the blood becomes less water-like and more syrup-like when it gets thicker. When blood is thicker, oxygen delivery is compromised, and anytime you can't deliver oxygen to the body, you drop energy levels dramatically. And flying by nature to the body is a breakdown stress inducing activity. When there's less oxygen, the body defaults to making energy in an alternative metabolic pathway. So the body essentially becomes more acidic because it's making energy in a dirty compensation manner. So the best thing that you can do when you're flying for 4 hours or more is make sure that your blood is flowing properly. You get up and you move around as often as possible. You hydrate extremely well so that even though it may be annoying, you're getting up somewhat frequently because you have to go to the washroom. And you can use things like compression socks or even do some exercises in your chair to contract muscles because sitting in the same place for 5 or 6 hours compounds this effect. So, from a digestive support formula, especially when it comes to choosing not so good quality foods, the one thing poor quality food choices typically have is they're high fat foods. And fat is flavor, but it's also, unfortunately, a cheap ingredient that can make things taste good. Why I'm selecting Enzymes Pro here is because Enzymes Pro has something that Digeszyme and Digeszyme Plus do not. Two factors specifically. It has a high lipase content. So even though it will help you support the breakdown of proteins and carbs, it's really good for people who have trouble with fats. The second thing is it has the sodium alginate like the probiotics do to ensure deep delivery because after the stomach, most of the breakdown that happens is in the early part of the small intestine, and all of the absorption happens in the small intestine. And that's where leaky gut and immune activated stress are most problematic from a perspective of food choices. So when to use Enzymes Pro is basically when you want to support your digestion when you're eating foods that are unaccustomed, i.e., you're eating outside of your normal window of food selection, or when you're overly indulging, because like fast food, indulgent foods are typically from the delicious food group, and they have high quantities of sugar and high quantities of fats, oftentimes together. And these are the ones that can really make you regret eating that second piece of pie or second piece of cake when you're lying in your bed at night, holding your bloated gut, going, why did I do that? So using Enzymes Pro as an insurance policy through major meals, especially when you know that you're going to allow yourself to enjoy and indulge, might be the thing that you are so happy that you thought about doing if you could do one thing on your vacation to support your digestive health. Second thing is using nattokinase. So, like I did say, long duration flights are stressful to the body because they change blood flow dynamics and oxygen carbon dioxide exchange within the body. And they do sell these as little support systems in Europe as blister packs. So taking nattokinase 1 to 2 hours before a flight on an empty stomach is what I would suggest because there is a duration of effect that's probably 4 to 8 hours long, depending upon the dose, the quantity, and when you take them. So you want to make sure that the nattokinase gets into your system prior to flying so you can have the maximal effect of the usefulness that nattokinase provides, specifically its anticoagulation effects. And an anticoagulant, a natural one, stops the red blood cells from clumping together, which is a process called rouleau, which thickens the blood and it has the negative implications of making the red blood cells' ability to deliver oxygen to tissues and cells through small capillaries much more challenging. So this is one reason why jet lag is compounded, especially the first day. You're exhausted from not only changing your time zones, but the stresses of being on an 8 to 12-hour flight are very different when you've pressurized the cabin to about 60% of the oxygen density at sea level. The third thing is understanding dietary practices well on your trip and understanding circadian rhythm. And the last part only is only relevant to those who are changing time zones. So when you're faced with food choices out of the norm, double down on two things. Be mindful of digestive support and be mindful of how you're eating. And most people, when they're at a buffet, are shoveling food into their face because they're just so excited that it's different from the normal, accustomed, boring processes of eating. But fundamentally, if you sit there and you chew your food thoroughly, eat mindfully, and eat quite slowly, you will also prevent yourself from overeating and inducing any sort of post-meal gut distress that all of us have experienced at least once on a vacation. If you are changing your time zones, there's a few things that I've learned that are best practices to try to acclimatize as quickly as possible. The first thing that you want to do when you land in your new destination, providing it's a specific time of day, is let the sun hit your face and let some sun hit your skin. There are photoreceptors in the eyes and there are photoreceptors on the skin that will absorb that light energy and it will tell your body based upon the kind of light the sun is giving off, depending upon the time of day, what time of day it is. So it stimulates the recovery response. You also want to ground if possible. If you've been on a plane for a long period of time, I did mention that you've been disconnected from the Earth's magnetic field. We rely upon the Earth to maximize our health. When your bare feet touch the ground, your body is able to pull electrons that are freely there from the Earth, helping to induce a slight negative charge in your body. A healthy cell is negatively charged because it has an abundance of free electrons. When you're traveling, the lack of connection to the Earth makes the body deficient in electrons, so you accumulate a lot of positive charge. You want to ground that out to the earth as quickly as possible so your body can start to restore more optimal operations and functions. Third thing that you want to do is you want to block blue light in the evenings, especially when you're trying to acclimatize to a new time zone, because you want your body to naturally regulate itself with the darkness signal that stimulates natural melatonin production. So it shortcuts the jet lag time in terms of how long it takes you to acclimatize to a new time zone. And if you can, figure out different strategies, either supplementally or using some sort of technology to help your nervous system and your brain totally chill out and relax. First thing I would suggest is HCl zyme. And you can take this on its by itself. You can take it in conjunction with a digestive enzyme. And what HCl does that a digestive enzyme likely doesn't do is it supports the first phase of digestion, typically where protein digestion is prioritized, but also where the neutralization of pathogens is supposed to happen based upon the mixing of the food with acidic environment of the stomach via HCl. If you travel and you've changed your time zone, again, that circadian rhythm disruption makes your digestive capability slightly compromised. So you might not produce as much stomach acid. You might not produce as an acidic, the acidity of the stomach environment might not be as low in terms of pH. And that's when these little critters that you can pick up on food can actually hijack their way into your body and take up residence in your small and large intestine. So my suggestion is taking 1 to 2 capsules of HCl zyme specifically with protein-rich meals, because this is where HCl really does shine, not only to properly and thoroughly break down your proteins to optimize digestion and absorption, but to keep your body free of potential pathogens, because this is where the opportunity is, especially if your body's in a little bit of a compromised state. The next one I would think about would be glutathione, because again, when you're at home, it's easy to make food choices and to be vigilant about what you're eating and what you're potentially cross-contaminating your foods with. We do know that DPP4 has a really, really good ability to help break down small quantities of the gliadin protein found in gluten. And again, this is not going to save you when you want to eat an entire pizza, but for those who have to be vigilant because of some sort of pre-existing condition, gluten sensitivities to celiac, these people don't have a choice if they want to feel their best. So if you are eating somewhere that says, oh yeah, we're gluten free, until you can verify it, the realities of cross-contamination are a possibility. If you want to feel as optimal as possible with your digestion, knowing that you're not necessarily gluten sensitive, but if you eat a lot of it, you start to feel a little less optimal. You can use one of these at every meal if you are going to be eating indulgent foods or foods outside of the norm, because besides the DPP4 content, you have an additional confluence of digestive enzymes that support the digestive process. You can pair this with a regular digestive enzyme. You can pair this with HCl, and you can create your own little protocol based upon what you need as an individual to ensure your digestive system is working optimally. And then there's our fiber products. And I like this little idea. You can take your microbes on holiday with you, but they stay in the same locale year round. The microbes that live in you have to live in your digestive system, regardless of the dynamics that they're exposed to. And believe it or not, changing your environment will change the profile of gut bacteria in your body in as little as 24 hours, simply by environment and food changes that you're unaccustomed to. The other aspect is most people on vacation, because they're eating more indulgent foods, are eating less fiber by virtue of food choices. So using Sun Fiber, the Sun Fiber GI packs, or the True Fiber, depending upon what your goal is, you can maintain your daily fiber consumption because you still want to get approximately your 25 to 35 grams of fiber on a regular basis. And what this fiber does specifically is it feeds select microbes. So it doesn't feed pathogens, but it feeds the keystone species that really underpin your microbiome's resilience. And in some cases, making sure that your keystone strains are retained helps the body to potentially crowd out and push out potential pathogens because of the innate health of your microbiome being anchored by true fiber or sun fiber. And then there's the Hedron suite of products, which we don't really talk about all that often. Hedron's a cool company in the sense that they make products that work a little bit more on what I would say the biophysics side is, to help not only optimize things like circadian rhythm, which we've talked about with the glasses, but they have other products that help anchor the innate energetic field of the body. When you get down to it, everything that is physiologic, i.e., the biochemical interactions of the body, are influenced by vibration, the movement of positive and negative. And when you're traveling, you're inducing a lot of electromagnetic stress to the body. Same thing with being in an airport with all the different Wi-Fi signals and everyone being on their phone. So controlling your circadian rhythm by making sure that you're honoring what the body needs with light and dark cycles are important. But if you want to check out some of the other cool products like the harmonizing pendants and various other things, you can use these while you travel to help anchor the body's electromagnetic energy field to, again, have less of a negative effect from being in a suboptimal environment. And then there's suntheanine. And what I love about theanine is twofold. One, there's no known toxicity profile. So not only is it an incredibly effective product, but it's an incredibly safe product that can also be really good for kids. And if you are having a hard time falling asleep, because besides being in a different time zone, sometimes sleeping in a new environment is quite challenging. Different bed, different air quality, different room than you're used to. So taking suntheanine, and you can combine this with other sort of calming herbs and minerals, some magnesium, some ashwagandha, or some holy basil, it can be a nice evening chill rest routine. And if you do have kids who are quite agitated, because let's be honest, long travel days for a kid are quite stressful mentally and emotionally, you can dose your kids, providing they can swallow capsules, and hopefully that makes the travel process a little more smooth rather than being asked, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And then there's being prepared for the unexpected. Because when you, I shouldn't say when, because I don't want to manifest a reality, but if unfortunately you are someone who is at the mercy of Montezuma's revenge or something, if you can turn a liquid into a solid as fast as possible, quality of your life is going to get better really quickly. So there's a two-pronged approach here. If something bad does happen, our go-to suggestion is True Flora because True Flora has this ability to induce an inhospitable environment that may disturb the pathogen and get it out of your body super quickly. I.e., if something takes up residence, remember, you're the landlord of your body. You want to be the one to evict it. So if you have what we will call microbiome-related GI disturbances, the lactobacillus species, specifically in True Flora, which are present in Theralac Pro but at lower quantities, are incredibly proficient and efficient lactate producers. So lactic acid is a small carbon acid that is made by lactobacillus microbes, the breakdown of lactose and such. And they have the ability to influence the acidity by dropping the pH of the small intestine specifically. And when you change the pH of an environment, you alter the landscape of the terrain. Certain pathogens, and specifically things like yeast and fungi, do not do well in an acidic environment, whereas other microbes that are more native to your microbiome do. So that's the first thing that can be potentially beneficial when you want to crowd out a bug that you've picked up, is change the local environment. Secondly, lactate also acts as a signaling molecule in a few ways. Firstly, it can be converted to other forms of short chain fatty acids to help enhance the energy availability of the local microbes. Lactate can be a signaling molecule to help the innate communication within the microbiome itself, the different microbes working together as colonies, and also act as a signaling molecule to influence how the immune cells and the microbiome interact with the microbes living in the gut. So if you are someone who has unfortunately picked something up, from a dosing perspective, you can take 2 capsules every roughly or approximately 4 hours for the first day or two, and we can talk about specifics after if people have specific questions. And you can keep dosing, although potentially reducing the dose until the severity of the infection or the colonization declines. After you've returned back to a baseline, my suggestion is move over to the True Bifido because the Bifido has a calming immune downregulating effect, specifically also focusing on the colon, because any sort of acute food poisoning incidents is likely going to cause some negative die-off reactions in the colon, where the principal site of bifido reside. These are very fragile species. So post-disturbance, you want to take Trubifido to help recolonize the colon after switching from the high dose of True Flora. And my suggestion is take 1 to 2 capsules for the duration of your trip or until bowel consistency returns to normal. And, in some cases, clinically, I have seen some scenarios where a lot of people uh, have marked the day that they went on vacation and they ate something and they never felt the same again. And that can be the precipitating pathway, if you will, to long-held chronic issues in the gut immune system. So making sure that you adequately recover from any sort of gut insult is paramount to making sure that you reclaim health within your microbiome and don't have to continue living with some kind of low caliber subclinical dysbiosis that comes and goes in its presentation based upon how stressed your body and your immune system are. The last thing is protein zyme. And this one hit me as like, well, if you're walking through the airport and you're trying to find the best of a bad situation, rather than having to go to a magazine rack and buy a chocolate bar or something, what's to say you can't have some single serve protein zyme protein packs, put some in a water bottle, shake it up, crush it, and then go. You can also do this on the plane where if you don't want to have the low quality cheap snacks that are given with your ticket, you can get high quality adequate nutrition in the form of vegan complementary protein because blend of the vegan proteins completes the amino acid profile in protein zyme. And it has a really nice consistency, unlike some other vegan proteins that is a mix between sand and chalk. But you also have the adequate benefits of concentrated micronutrients with the fruit and vegetable aspects that are included, enzymes and probiotics. And it's super simple to open one of these, put it in a water bottle, shake it up, throw the package out, rinse the water bottle out, because the last thing you want to do is forget about old protein in a water bottle. If you want to gross anyone out, have them smell a used protein shaker cup after you forgot about it in the car for a week. But this is a really good strategy if you want to maintain high quality food choices and nutrition standards when on the go, rather than having to make the best of a bad situation. So our vacation checklist is as follows. Plan the best you can or are willing. What I mean by this is don't turn this into something that adds more stress to your plate than you need to. But if you have your insurance policies, grab your digestive enzymes, grab your probiotics, and whatever other products may resonate with you based upon how you experience potentialities of stresses while traveling. Second thing is don't turn the event into a pressure cooker. Give yourself time and just know that your immune system is going to be tested, because being in an airport, being on a plane, being in a new environment are all unconscious things that your physiology and your body are going to have to adapt to and make the best of. When you're on vacation, make the best food choices you can, but if you've earned it, treat yourself. Live a little bit outside the boundaries of normal, color outside the lines, proverbially speaking, in life. But if you do, eat well, eat mindfully, and enjoy the process. If you are in a foreign place and it's a place you've never been to before and you've heard horror stories, don't be too daring. If you're going to Thailand, I might not suggest eating the street food the first or second day you're on your trip. Hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst. If something does happen to your digestive system, at least now you know there are strategies when you can use probiotics as a tool for helping your gut and your microbiome recover. And if you are somewhere where the weather is optimal, get outside, get some sun, get some fresh air, ground as much as possible. Think about why humans love the beach. You get all the four elements together. You get the fire of the sun, you get the water of the ocean, you get the earth of the sand that you're walking on, and you get the gentle breeze and the salt air that's coming off. And that's why people feel so good. We are beings that are connected to the earth, and when you can connect back into nature, it really does act as medicine for your body, especially for your nervous system, because most people are riding that adrenaline train, living in a fight or flight state of existence. And the more you can let your body breathe out and truly relax, the more your physiology is going to thank you. So, from me and from everyone at Master Supplements and US Enzymes, if you are going on vacation this August, we hope you have a great vacation season. We hope that this was informative, useful, you learned something new. And the best thing when it comes to any aspect of being ill prepared or unexpected in life is to have somewhat of a base plan. And if something does happen, at least you know what to do and you have a strategy.